Welcome, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you might be joining us from. Great to have you with us. My name is Laura Shrake. I am with the Council of the Great Lakes Region, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our Business and Sustainability webinar series, which is our virtual platform where we address different sustainability topics and feature regional leadership and successes. We use this platform to help educate, to inspire, and to engage stakeholders who are committed to building a better future in the Great Lakes region. We have a very informative webinar today on the topic of hydrogen and the clean energy transition in the Great Lakes region. We will hear from expert speakers from the Midwest Alliance for Clean Hydrogen and the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. They will talk to us about the latest hydrogen developments throughout the region and across the border between the US and Canada. We do have a lot to get through today, and I want to have plenty of time for our panelists, so I will be brief, but I do want to provide some high-level context of the region and of the council to start. So the binational Great Lakes region, which includes 8 US states and 2 Canadian provinces, holds the 5 Great Lakes, which with their connecting channels form one of the largest fresh surface water systems in the world. This freshwater system makes up 20% of Earth's surface freshwater and 84% of North America's. This mega region also holds major industries that generate business for both countries and provide roughly 51 million jobs. That is a third of the US and Canada's workforce. So it is the economic engine of North America. The region shares sectors, integrated supply chains, and connected transportation corridors. And it's positioned to be a leader in innovation and a growing player in clean technology. And because no one single organization or sector has all the resources needed to solve the region's challenges, the Council of the Great Lakes region has created cross-border, multi-sector, and multi-stakeholder programs. A few of our program areas include circular economy, water stewardship, and of significance to today's webinar topic, decarbonization, a focus area where we are addressing with the Great Lakes Carbon Collaborative. It's an initiative co-led with the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development. The Great Lakes Carbon Collaborative is a cross-industry platform designed to mobilize the collective energy and motivation of businesses to create measurable impact in reducing carbon emissions in the region. If you are interested in today's webinar, you may also be interested in the Great Lakes Carbon Collaborative, as one of the working groups of the collaborative is dedicated to decarbonization through hydrogen. And I will put a link to the Carbon Collaborative in the chat shortly if anyone is interested. But that brings us back to today's webinar topic, hydrogen and the clean energy transition. The region's energy future is becoming more diverse and complex, and to meet ambitious decarbonization goals, the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy is needed. Hydrogen is expected to play a key role in the decarbonization of the region's many sectors, especially hard to electrify sectors. And both the US and Canada are increasingly interested in and investing in hydrogen. For hydrogen to be considered green, however, it must be produced using renewable resources. We will hear about the landscape of the hydrogen sector and what role clean hydrogen will play in the energy transition from our esteemed guests today. And with us are Neil Banwart, Chief Integration Officer at the Midwest Alliance for Clean Hydrogen, and Yvette Vera Perez, President and CEO of the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. Yvette and Neil are going to take turns presenting, and together they'll provide us a full overview of the hydrogen landscape in the binational Great Lakes region. We will start with an introduction to hydrogen from Yvette, a 101 for those of us who are somewhat new to the topic. And she'll break down its place in the clean energy transition, as well as give a glimpse of the use of hydrogen in Canada. And then Neil will step in and introduce us to hydrogen hubs and what they mean for communities and economic opportunities. Neil will also share insight of use of hydrogen in the US. And then we'll hear from each of them again on markets in the Great Lakes for hydrogen application. And hopefully we will have some time for a short Q&A at the end. But with that, I will now turn it over to Yvette. Welcome. And I'll let you hand it over to Neil once you're finished with your part of the presentation. So over to you, Yvette.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you for having us here and facilitating this important conversation. So yes, my name is Yvette Vera-Perez, President and CEO at the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. I'll tell you a little bit about us, and I think that I would be saying next each time, right? So CHFCA, we strive to be a unified voice for the hydrogen sector in Canada. We have about 200 members, and we focus very much on advocacy, education, and awareness. We try to help and enable our members develop B2B relationships and between themselves, and having reached a critical mass at this point of 200 members across the country, conversations and business opportunities are increasingly more attractive. Next. Well, I just mentioned we have about 200 members. They span the whole hydrogen, the whole supply chain for hydrogen, from those producing power to those producing hydrogen through different pathways, to those moving, storing, around the safety arena, and end users. Many of these names will be not known to you, and many of these names also operate in the US. Next. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a incomplete education, if you will, just a preview of hydrogen. Hydrogen is a very interesting topic. Those of us in the sector are learning every day, so nobody knows absolutely everything about hydrogen. That's what makes my job so attractive to me. Next. So a little bit about hydrogen as an element. Is the first element in the periodic table. For those of us who maybe remember a little bit of chemistry, is the most abundant element in the world. It is very light, pound for pound on a mass basis. It contains quite a lot of energy. It is light. That's not the same on a volume basis. An interesting and attractive point of hydrogen is that if you combust it, the only product is water. So no NOx or SOx or particulate matter, etc. It is versatile. It can be used as an energy carrier, and it has potential for a number of applications. One very small, very nerdy trivia fact is that the reason that October 8 is International Hydrogen Day is because of hydrogen's molecular weight, 1.008, 1008. So that now you know why October 8 is International Hydrogen Day. Next one. A little bit about hydrogen today. Hydrogen produced today is mostly from fossil fuels, and I'll get into the colors of hydrogen and what that means. Worldwide, between 75 and 95 million tons of hydrogen produced. Canada is on a per capita basis is considered a major producer of hydrogen. Here in Canada, we produce a good 3 million tons of hydrogen annually. So we do have a good experience in what is moving and safe handling of hydrogen. Obviously, big chunk of emissions reductions from the CO2 emissions in this way of producing hydrogen. And part of what we're talking about today is how to produce hydrogen more cleanly. Next. There are many hydrogen production pathways, and these are just some examples. As new pathways emerge, you will see new colors emerge as well. So you probably have heard about the colors of hydrogen. There's what we call gray hydrogen, and that is the hydrogen mostly produced today through SMR. In this case, SMR is steam methane reforming. And the sources could be methane or coal. There's also some differentiation between whether or not you use methane or coal. There's gray, black. Blue hydrogen is pretty much the same processes, SMR, ATR, autothermal reforming, and capturing that CO2 from that process. And that's where CCS comes in, carbon capture and sequestration. There's what we call turquoise hydrogen, and that's produced from pyrolysis. It is a technology that is actually developing very fast. And a number of our members are in this particular segment. Green hydrogen is produced from renewable energy sources such as wind and solar, for example, and you use electrolysis as a way to produce hydrogen, which is splitting water. Now you could also connect directly to the grid, and that would not, strictly speaking, be considered green. So you see the color complexity. And finally, another color is pink. So if your source of electricity to produce that hydrogen is nuclear, then you call it pink. So next slide. And again, there are many other colors. There's blue, there's dark green, etc. So when you keep thinking about that color rainbow, it does become complex. However, colors are really helpful in getting to understand hydrogen and categorizing it, if you will, by pathways. Carbon intensity is a measure that helps everyone understand the carbon footprint, the CO2 emissions from hydrogen, regardless of the pathway. And within each pathway, there are always little complexities, like I mentioned. So carbon intensity is being more and more increasingly used as that measure. Both Canada and the US have developed incentives for hydrogen based on carbon intensity or carbon footprint. I have a little table here for the Canada Clean Hydrogen ITC, and it's also based on tiers, and depending on the hydrogen footprint of that tier, that's the incentive you will get. The US has an ITC, an investment tax credit. It also has a PTC, a production tax credit, also based on tiers. Maybe Neil will talk a little bit more about that. Next. So Canada, I just mentioned the hydrogen tax credit, but I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview. We have a number of tax credits here in Canada, and you can see to the left the tight timeline for all of them to come online. We just provided feedback on the draft legislation for the Clean Hydrogen ITC, but depending, your project is much more than just the core hydrogen production. So the little picture on the right shows the different incentives that the project could access. So there's some complexities there. There's also access to other grants and to other funds like SIFT, Strategic Innovation Fund, etc. So complex landscape. We work with our members. We work with our partners to help them navigate. Next. And I think this is my last slide for this section. I just wanted to show you a little bit about the Canadian landscape. So not only the Great Lakes provinces, but just give you a little bit of a flavor. Hydrogen is that one industry that can allow every Canadian province to participate. We have announced very recently projects in BC with Fortescue. FFI is also a company operating in the US with Air Products. That is a company known on both sides of the border as well. Dow Chemicals just announced a very large project as well in Alberta. We have projects on the East Coast looking at exporting into Europe. And then Ontario and Quebec have announced also a number of projects. So every province is using their own core competencies to develop hydrogen projects. And with that, I believe, Neil, I think I'm going to be handing it over to you.
Perfect. No, thank you, Yvette. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk about clean hydrogen. So my name is Neil Banwart, and I am part of the Midwest Alliance for Clean Hydrogen. Have a number of slides that I'd like to go through today. So I'm going to start at a high level and talk about the United States Department of Energy's Clean Hydrogen Hub program, just give a little bit of an overview there. And then I'm going to drill in and talk about MACH2, or the Midwest Alliance for Clean Hydrogen. I'm going to pass it back to Yvette. She's going to talk about some use cases. And then finally, at the end, I'm going to talk about some ways that we're thinking about linking our hub with Canada, and really our goal to expand well beyond the initial funding from the United States Department of Energy. So with that, if we go to the next slide. So as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, there was provisions to establish so-called hydrogen hubs across the United States. And so applicants who wanted to apply for hub funding needed to paint a picture to the Department of Energy of the entire hydrogen value chain, from the production of the molecules, the transportation and storage of the molecules, to the end use. The DOE said that they would award between 6 to 10 hydrogen hubs across the country. It was a very competitive process with the Department of Energy. When the application window opened up, there were 79 concept papers that were submitted. So sort of 79 initial applications. That number was reduced down to the full applications. In the summer of 2023, there was a down select, and certain hubs were invited to the Department of Energy in DC to give in-person interviews. And then finally, on October 13th of 2023, the Biden administration, President Joe Biden, announced that there were 7 hydrogen hubs in the US that had been selected. So this image here shows the 7 hydrogen hubs that have been selected around the country. And you can see there's a good geographic distribution of these hydrogen hubs. We have the Pacific Northwest. California, Arches has a hydrogen hub. There's a hydrogen hub down in Texas called the High Velocity Hub. In the upper Midwest, we have the Heartland Hub. And then what I'm representing, and we'll talk to more about, is the Midwest Hydrogen Hub, or MACH2. To the east of us is an Appalachian Hydrogen Hub, or ARCH2. And then a little further east is the Mid-Atlantic Hub, also called MACH2. So these are the 7 hydrogen hubs. And notice the word at the top of the slide is selected. So we have not won the award from the Department of Energy. Along with the 6 other hubs, we are in negotiations with the Department of Energy, certainly hoping that we can conclude those negotiations and enter into a collaborative agreement with the United States Department of Energy and really get to work on our hydrogen hub in short order. We go to the next slide, peel back the onion a little bit. And so when we were forming a hydrogen hub in the Midwest, we founded it on 4 pillars. Yvette talked about the different production methods of the hydrogen molecule. And we, in the MACH2 hub, actually have 3 of those different colors, or 3 different production methods. We have electrolysis with renewable power, or green hydrogen. We have electrolysis with nuclear power, or pink hydrogen. And then we have carbon capture, steam methane reform with carbon capture, or blue hydrogen. So we actually have 3 different production modes or nodes in our region. We'll talk about this in much more detail, and certainly link and hope to link our hub across the border. But we are in the Midwest, we're a leading transportation corridor. And then other industries that we're targeting, agricultural, manufacturing, and heavy industry. Again, we'll go into more detail. That's our second pillar. Our third pillar, it was very important that we had financially strong sponsors. And so while the Department of Energy is putting money into the Hydrogen Hub program, our project partners had to put matching funds in as well. And so we looked for projects and project sponsors who had strong balance sheets, but also experience in investing and making successful, very large scale opportunities. we built a governance structure, we built a small management team, of which I am a part, to really form a single cohesive hydrogen hub. And then the fourth pillar, very, very important to us, is the positive impact that the hydrogen hubs will have on our communities and the residents. And so there's a couple of slides that I'll share about creating quality jobs and entrepreneurships in the disadvantaged communities in our region. If we flip to the next slide, please. There's a lot on this slide. I'm probably going to spend quite a bit of time on this slide, but this just gives you a snapshot of the region for Mach 2. And so we're really, our locations are primarily in 3 different United States, the state of Illinois, the state of Indiana, and the state of Michigan. And we have, and Yvette has touched on some of these, we have an abundance of assets at our disposal. Yvette mentioned the Great Lakes, the river system. We are a major transportation hub. Some 10% of the Class 8 heavy-duty truck traffic in all of the United States traverses through our 3-state region. We have 6 Class A rail lines that go through our region, sort of converging in the Chicagoland area, and then our region is home to 6 major airports. So what are some of the sectors that we're targeting? What are some of the offtakes for this clean hydrogen? Well, heavy industry, again, steel. So in the United States, between 20 to 25% of domestic steel is actually produced in Northwest Indiana, so right in the midst of our hub. Certainly, we're considered to be the breadbasket of the United States, and so there's a lot of agriculture, a lot of use of ammonia. Heavy-duty trucking, certainly a sector which is harder to electrify, and so really excited about the opportunities for hydrogen fuel cell, long-haul heavy-duty trucks. And then aviation, starting with sustainable aviation fuel, but then longer-term fuel cell planes, and fuel cell rail, fuel cell marine applications. All of those are feasible in our region. On the bottom of the slide here, you can see we have 9 different nodes or sub-recipients to the DOE funding. And you can sort of match the pins in the map. So pin number 1 here matches to project number 1 down here. And I'll briefly describe a couple of these different projects. And so project number 1, again, is the nuclear-powered electrolysis or the production project. And that is led by Constellation Energy, where you would, the proposal is to take an electrolyzer and hook that behind the meter using nuclear power to produce the pink hydrogen. Our second production node, the green hydrogen, is a group effort between Invenergy and Air Liquide. And you'll notice there's not a dot on the map here or a little pin. That project location is to be determined, to be announced, but it will be in this region. And then our third production node is the blue hydrogen, led by BP, and that's up in Northwest Indiana. We have a project partner, GTI Energy, who's worked for many years in helping commercial and industrial users decarbonizing, both in facilities, but also with respect to transportation. And then again, mobility is a big emphasis for our hydrogen hub, and we have 4 distinct mobility projects. 3 of those are in the state of Michigan. We have a little to the west of Detroit, Michigan, a project with the American Center for Mobility. Project number 6, this is very exciting for us and hopefully for our brethren just north of the border, is a series of hydrogen truck stops. So really the truck stop of the future, where it would not just be the traditional diesel and gasoline, but you'd also have renewable natural gas, high-speed charging, and then importantly, hydrogen. And the envisioned location of the very first truck stop of the future is in the Detroit area, and ideally very near the Gordie Howe International Bridge, which is under construction. And there is a significant amount of Class 8 truck traffic, again, as was mentioned, that traverses from Canada to the US and vice versa. And we'd love to have a hydrogen refueling station right as you enter into the United States. And then there's a mobility project led out of Indianapolis. And really what we want to do is build a true corridor, initially connecting Chicago to Indianapolis to Detroit. We certainly recognize that that's just the start. Again, our goal is to continue to grow and expand the reach and the breadth of our hub. Yvette talked about the different ways to move the molecules. One of the ways to move hydrogen molecules is through a dedicated hydrogen pipeline. And our project number 9, we're going to work with Nicor Gas, and they're going to build a relatively small dedicated hydrogen pipeline to move the molecules from the production site to the end use. So again, just a little bit of a preview of our 9 different production nodes or project nodes. We flip to the next slide, please. So I talked about the impact to our communities. So we've worked with our strong community benefits team, and we've identified, we use the term disadvantaged communities or DACs. We've identified in our region, there's over 1,200 disadvantaged communities and tribal areas in our region. And there's the population of over 3.8 million people living in these disadvantaged communities. Our preliminary calculations, our preliminary estimates are that by unleashing the full hydrogen hub, we would avoid almost 4 million metric tons of CO2 emissions per year. So really, really excited about that number and the positive impact. If we flip to the next slide, investing in the American workforce. So we estimate that this $1 billion from the Department of Energy, combined with corporate monies well in excess of that $1 billion, will create 13,600 jobs. A lot of those, of course, in the construction, building of the production facilities, fueling stations, things of that nature. But it will result, we estimate, in about 1,500 permanent jobs. And these are good paying jobs supporting, the energy transition. We recognize that there's perhaps a skill gap here in terms of finding qualified applicants. And so we plan to invest money to support local workers to bring them up to speed, to prepare them for jobs in this energy transition. And then DEIA. As we composed our management team, we promote diversity. We target and we ask our project sponsors to target diverse hiring and even subcontracted dollars to minority and businesses. Very aggressive goals here, 45% diverse hiring, 40% subcontracted dollars. So challenging goals, but we're certainly up to the challenge here. We go to the next slide here. Again, inclusiveness on the entrepreneurship side. We realize that hydrogen is a growing and emerging and to some degree an early stage opportunity. And so we've allocated some funding to provide to startups through an inclusive entrepreneurship program, and really targeting trying to find minority, women, disabled, and veteran-owned small businesses. Love to hear and see ideas and fund those ideas to commercial scale. Go to the next slide here. I'm going to hand it back to Yvette, and then she's going to talk a little bit more, and then she'll hand it back to me to sort of wrap up here. Yvette?
Thank you so much, Neil. That's great and a great example of how hubs can work in Canada. I am gonna take the opportunity to invite myself to visit you and the truck stop of the future.
Please do.
Yeah, how wonderful is that? Thanks. Yeah, so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the opportunities that we see in Canada. Next slide. So I'm starting with the same slide that Neil presented. So I will absolutely not go into details, but I'm gonna, from the perspective of Canada, look at all these different hubs that are touching on our borders, and this is why we are talking together with Neil today. There's plenty of opportunity for collaboration. There's plenty of opportunity for helping decarbonize corridors. In my next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about transport. And next slide. Thanks. And I'm going to focus a little bit more on motor transport for a moment here. Many of you know the 401 corridor. The 401 corridor is a vital economic link between Ontario, Eastern Canada, and the US. It goes all the way to Windsor, and from there it can get into Detroit and on the Lake Erie area as well. Can get into St. Catharines and then into the US. So this corridor supports 10,000 trucks daily. That is equivalent to a $380 million of value being carried every day. So you can imagine the importance of the 401 route, and we can only imagine the potential for decarbonization if we only refer to heavy-duty trucks coming in and out that corridor from the US into Canada and from Canada into the US. Just a very quick calculation: 10,000 trucks running the equivalent of 300 kilometers would help us with clean hydrogen, would help us reduce emissions in the order of 3,000 tons of CO2 per day. So that's and I've done other calculations that look a little bit more positive, but I left it only at 300 kilometers. There are many options here. There's fuel cell electric vehicle trucks. We could look at dual fuel trucks as a transition, internal combustion engine trucks as well. Next slide, please. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about fueling station development. Very modest. However, when the markets are ready, things move very quickly. Since between 2021 and 2023, this is worldwide, the number of fueling stations, hydrogen fueling stations across the world has increased by 60%. Canada and the US are not among the pioneers here. Asia is, but again, once the markets are ready, things move very quickly. We're looking at 7 fueling station projects being under development in Quebec. Between 2025 and 2027, 28, they would be deployed. We announced the very first fueling station in Toronto, in Mississauga. A lot more is needed. But a number of our members are working on the evaluation of a number of other fueling stations across the 401 corridor. And again, this is only heavy duty. When we think about medium duty, light duty buses, there's tremendous opportunity here for the hydrogen sector to penetrate the mobility space. The picture at the bottom, this is not an Ontario or Quebec project. This is an Alberta project piloted by one of our partners, the Alberta Motor Transport Association. This is a truck that just a couple of weeks ago, maybe many of you saw this in the news, did an Edmonton, Calgary, Edmonton trip. And it was very successful, and it's just the beginning of getting hydrogen heavy-duty mobility on the roads. Next. So that's it for motor transport. Other possibilities, and again, things are moving so quickly. Just in December, there's this little tugboat, Hydro Tug 1, became the very first hydrogen-powered combustion engine in the world. Now, this is in the Netherlands. It's not a Canadian example, but it shows you the possibilities and the possibilities across the Great Lakes region specifically. This was an internal combustion engine. And just so that you get an idea, 415 kilograms of hydrogen would allow this tugboat to run for 24 hours. There's a number of shipping companies, mostly in Europe, in the Netherlands, that are already commissioning hydrogen-operated or ammonia-operated vessels. We have had a number of conversations with the Coast Guard here. Coast Guard, obviously, they have one very important job to do, and that is to help ship, etc., get safe to shore and then assist when needed. So obviously part of the conversation is how can we, yes, embrace hydrogen or one of its derivatives, but do it in a way that their job is not compromised. So lots of conversations happening on that front. And I just wanted to bring the notion of the Great Lakes as a marine trade corridor. And this is something that has not been explored much, but perhaps today is the beginning of exploring that conversation as well. Next. And then finally, hydrogen by rail. Again, I would love to have an Ontario story here, but we have two good Canadian stories. At Quebec, Alstom just piloted a project just showing how hydrogen mobility by rail would work, and carrying over 10,000 passengers over a number of months. Very successful pilot in British Columbia and in Alberta. CP Railways and Ballard and ATCO, all our members, are developing a project in which they're retrofitting diesel locomotives into a fuel cell locomotive. So a lot of action, a lot of potential, and part of the work that Neil is doing, and then hopefully we will do more in terms of hub development, is turn that potential into reality. Next. And then I just wanted to show you a couple of projects, production projects in the region. So the very bottom one is a very interesting one, recently announced in Quebec, and it's going to be producing 70,000 tons of hydrogen, of which actually 1/3 will be dedicated to decarbonizing long-haul transportation, so fueling stations. We have Enbridge here. Neil referred a little bit also to power to gas and blending. We have a number of projects in addition to this in the works or in analysis in Ontario, and then we have Atura Power that has projects in the St. Catharines area, and other projects looking at hydrogen from waste. So this is just some of the initiatives being taking place in Ontario. Both Ontario and Quebec have hydrogen strategies, and a lot more under development. So hopefully we will see a lot more projects. There's a lot of potential, but clearly we need to also have the hydrogen to enable that potential. And with that, next, over to Neil. Thanks, Neil.
Perfect. Thank you, Yvette. So I just wanted to talk a little bit more about ways that we could potentially, continue to expand and work really in tandem with the good work that is happening north of our border. And so again, if we think about the different ways to move the hydrogen molecules, one of the ways to move the molecules is via truck. And so, we certainly welcome and advances in the fuel cell technology. We'd like to see more hydrogen fuel cell trucks. We'd like to see the cost curve come down. One of the important components of transportation is the price of hydrogen. And so by producing larger and larger volumes of hydrogen, which we aim to do in the hub, we hope to bring that price of hydrogen per kilogram down. In fact, the United States Department of Energy has a hydrogen shot goal to bring the price of clean hydrogen to $1 per kilogram in 1 decade. It's called the 1-1-1. Again, a really aggressive target, but if we can bring the price of clean hydrogen down, you know, somewhere in that ballpark to that level, we think we'd really start to see the switch flip there. People talk about the chicken and the egg problem, and so we're certainly trying to really solve both. We're trying to produce a large amount of clean hydrogen, but also have off-takers lined up. So we've touched on, you know, a number of industries here. Again, back to the rail industry. I think that again, there's good work going on north of us with respect to fuel cell locomotives, but we could think, in addition to the fuel cell locomotives, perhaps using the rail system as a way to move molecules if it works. We talked about marine applications. Appreciated the picture of the hydrogen boat. Moving hydrogen molecules through the Great Lakes is also an interesting possibility. Perhaps you could convert clean hydrogen to green ammonia and use that ammonia, thinking that as a carrier, and you could move that all along the Great Lakes region. You could perhaps even think longer term about exporting some of these clean molecules. These are some of the opportunities. So again, really excited about what we're trying to build here in the Midwest of the United States, but also very, very excited and interested in hearing what's happening north and really seeking to collaborate across these different initiatives. I know we've talked a lot, so I think with that, I will turn it back over. Laura.
Great. Well, thank you, Yvette and Neil. I know I have learned a lot already in the last 40 minutes from you both, so thank you. We have a lot of questions that have come in, so let's just move right into the Q&A because we'll just try to get through as many of these questions as we can. I want to start off with a question that's come in around technology. And the question is asking, how is the advancement of technology impacting the affordability to produce green hydrogen? And I guess I'll open it to either one of you that want to take that one.
Can you repeat it?
Sure. It is, how is the advancement of technology impacting the affordability to produce green hydrogen?
Do you want to go first, Neil?
I can take I'll take a shot at this, Yvette, and please feel free to add. So, you know, the process of electrolysis has been performed for quite a while, but most of the electrolysis that has happened historically has been relatively small scale. So I've worked in the hydrogen industry for 8-10 years, and it used to be a megawatt project was big, and then it was 5 megawatts, and then 10 megawatts, and 20. Well, now we're really starting to see, and Yvette touched on this, the size of the projects that are being announced. 100 megawatt, 250, 500, gigawatts scale projects. And so, really the advancement, I think, is more on the size of these projects. There's certainly been some technological advancements using different catalysts, efficiencies and things of that nature. But I think the real interesting thing and the real challenge, and confident we can get there, is to really scale from relatively small electrolysis projects to very, very large scale. Yvette, if you have anything else to add to that.
Well, I completely agree with you, Neil, on this. And the other thing that I will add is that efficiencies improve in practice. So from the internal combustion engine to any process, I'm probably wearing my engineer hat here. As the industry gets going, the efficiency in an electrolyzer today is not going to be the same efficiency in an electrolyzer 10 years from now. So as the industry gets going, as the economies of scale happen, the cost will go down, the efficiencies will go up, and the learnings from the process. This is a new industry. The learnings from the processes will be implemented. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And yeah, and so there's another question that's come in around binational coordination, commenting that there is a lack of binational coordination to pool the hydrogen production resources. And just curious if you could recommend any initial steps or comment on the approach for coordination.
I can start, Neil, if you want, and then so on our side, I completely agree. There needs to be more coordination happening. I know there is an initiative, and I wish I had the name in my head. It's a transportation corridor collaboration. It doesn't necessarily yet include hydrogen a lot. It includes a lot of EVs, but cross-border collaboration on that front. We need to do more, obviously, on the hydrogen front, but there's the first steps between Canada and the US have been taken. A lot of what we do, and then hopefully some events coming up soon, we collaborate with our sister association in the US, CHFCA, the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Association, in getting members to talk. So you could call it very grassroots, but we're looking to formalize. We have an MOU already in place, and we're looking to formalize from an industry pool perspective what that collaboration should look like.
Oh, I would echo, Yvette's sentiments here. I think, grassroots forums like this, just having ideas, being able to take those ideas, to our legislatures, to the administration. I think really to unleash the full value of hydrogen in the United States, we need to rely on, some of the resources and some of the work that's being done in Canada. And I hope the inverse is also true. So very open to collaboration. Again, I think one of the goals of the United States Department of Energy's Hydrogen Hub program is this money's, and it's $7 billion US, so not an insignificant amount of money, but it's going to take a lot more than that, right? That's just almost like seed money or really getting started here. And so we need more private investments. We need more cross-country collaboration to really get, wide-scale liftoff here.
Yeah. And in addition to the cross-border coordination, there's a question that's come in about coordination amongst the US hubs. Can you comment on that, Neil?
Sure. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. Initially, this was a competition, right? And so there were, as I mentioned early on, 79 different hubs that were vying for one of these 6 to 10 spots. And so, to be completely honest, there wasn't a lot of collaboration, but now the 7 hubs have been announced. And so we have, been on some different calls. We've recommended, sort of forming, working groups across the hubs. And I think those will continue to evolve so that we can really, again, not function as 7 separate hubs, but really kind of one, cohesive hub across the United States.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And you had mentioned, well, it was a little bit of the timeline, now I'm forgetting exactly what it was that you had said. But there's a question on the timeline for scaling hydrogen use in the different sectors. For the US and for Canada, can you both comment on sort of likely timelines?
Sure, I can start. So, the Hydrogen Hub program is actually a fairly lengthy program, right? Some of the projects that could perhaps move through phases a little bit quicker could be done maybe in an 8-year time frame. Sort of the tail end would be more like the 10 to 12 years. So really, while we're very excited, to get up and running here, it takes a while, right? Some of these large scale production projects really just take, years to get off the ground. And so we're in it for the long haul, I guess I would say, over the next decade and certainly well beyond. Yvette, how would you think about that question?
I would completely agree with that, Neil. I sometimes, I always say, think marathon, not sprint. Yeah. We really need to keep the stamina because we're here for the long run. We don't I'm gonna say yet, have a hub program in Canada, and I really hope that we learn from the guys south of the border, and we develop one. We're just about to get the ITC legislated. We just provided the feedback on the draft legislation on the 5th. Lots of room for improvement. However, it's going to be a great instrument, but same like Neil said, the hub's funding is one instrument. A lot more is needed, not only in terms of capital, but also sound policies and policies that complement each other, as opposed to policies that work as at cross purposes. So imagine a giant puzzle of hydrogen, that the hydrogen industry is. How do you put together all those different elements of the puzzle to support the industry? The renewable energy projects on the East Coast and on the West Coast, these are major endeavors. You could even isolate the components. The renewable energy, the wind project is already a major project. The hydrogen project is a major project. The ammonia, for example, if we're talking about ammonia or liquid organic hydrogen as a carrier, all of these are major projects. They require the financing, they require the permitting. So there's a huge need for agility, but at the same time, there's also that need to understand that it is a process, and it is a process that can be optimized, but you cannot skip the steps that you need to go through.
Yeah, there's so much going on, and I know you have covered so much in your presentations, and you could have dived so much deeper. I know. So one of the questions that came in is commenting on how gray hydrogen is dominating, which is not a clean energy, and asking what will it take for green to be the dominant form of hydrogen, because we're talking about the transition to clean energy. So can you comment on, I guess, the timeline and the efforts needed to make that happen?
Do you want to start, Neil?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it is absolutely true that, you know, the primary color, if you will, today is gray hydrogen. And the simple reason for that is the economics in the scale. So, you know, using natural gas to produce gray hydrogen is very, very low cost, and you could do it at a very large scale. In terms of the delta between, you know, the gray hydrogen and the green, unfortunately, there is a sizable delta. Certainly, as you scale, as you do larger and larger, electrolysis green hydrogen projects, the cost curve comes down. Yvette talked about advances in efficiencies in technologies. So certainly, the goal would be that through those you could narrow the gap. Of course, there are different incentives and so forth that to kind of help bridge some of that in the short run. But yeah, I mean, just to be honest, there is absolutely a delta, and again, we hope that delta changes over time. Yvette, what would you comment on that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if I may add, the bulk of I could have gone deeper into this, but the bulk of the gray hydrogen that is used today has been used as a feedstock within the say oil sands and this type of oil and gas operations. Some of that hydrogen is a byproduct from a number of operations. So it has been a very specific concentrated use. Decarbonization, years ago, one of the main challenges we had in the 90s was air quality. One of the biggest challenges we have today is decarbonization, and that's how hydrogen has emerged again as a very important tool. That perhaps there were other tools to allow us to improve air quality. Hydrogen is an excellent tool to enable decarbonization. So now is that we're looking at different ways. Canada, for example, have very clean grids, generally speaking. So electrolytic hydrogen would inherently be very low carbon. We have something called the Clean Electricity Regulation that stipulates that the grids should be net zero by 2035. Also, there's a lot of advancements on the carbon capture and sequestration front. You're talking 95%, 98%. So that means that you sequester most of that CO2 coming from what you would call a blue hydrogen operation, which is basically gray plus carbon capture and sequestration. So there are many tools to make hydrogen low carbon. And part of the reason this had not been done until today is because it was used in a very concentrated manner. And these are the first steps we're taking. They have to be very fast steps towards decarbonization of the industry.
Can I add, I agree 100% with that. I would just like to add one more thing. I haven't been able to read all the questions, but I read a question about white hydrogen. And I guess,
Yes.
you know, maybe for some fun, do some research on this, right? Because the thing that makes hydrogen expensive is the electrolysis process. You know, it requires energy to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen molecules. Well, what white hydrogen is basically hydrogen existing in its natural form. And there are, across the globe, some elements of white hydrogen. The billion-dollar question, maybe trillion-dollar question, is how much white hydrogen is there across the globe? We don't know, right? There hasn't been a lot of exploration, but I would say, and again, this is maybe a bit aspirational, but if there is a decent amount of white hydrogen, that really could be a game changer. No one knows, but just wanted to mention that. So.
Yeah. Fossil hydrogen.
Thanks, Neil. There was a question, Neil, for you regarding getting involved in the Mach 2 project. Can you comment on what the best way for service providers would be to get involved?
Sure. Yeah. So we do have a website. It's just mach2.com. We could maybe put that in the chat. But you know, go to the website, and then there's a contact us form. So go ahead and fill out the form there, and it will ask, you know, are you a hydrogen producer? Are you a technology provider? Kind of, you know, filtering the questions, and then sort of behind the scenes, we take those questions and then sort of divvy them up. So yeah, please you know, reach out to us through that platform. We're also, shameless plug, we're also active on I guess X and, you know, LinkedIn. So, you know, certainly follow us as we progress here. So.
Thanks. Yeah, and I put earlier in the presentation, I did put the link to both of your organizations into the chat for our audience. So
perfect.
They have access to that. And Yvette, if there's any organizations wanting to get involved with your organization, would you suggest also reaching out through your website?
You can reach out through the website. You can reach out to me, and we'll make sure that that we get back to you. Our team is very responsive, so yeah, we will get back to you.
That's great. I know we had a lot to cover in a short amount of time. We've had a lot of questions come in with the registrations and also live during this webinar, and we're just unfortunately not going to be able to get to all of them. So we'll make sure when we send out the recording to the webinar that it does, the links to your websites are also going out to our audience. And so I guess I will maybe ask one final question. And let's see. This one, let's see, how should a company approach the topic considering the transition to hydrogen versus battery-powered fleet or other operations? Is that something that either of you?
I mean, you know, I would just say it depends on the use case. You know, if it's you know, long haul heavy duty trucking, that's very difficult to electrify. If it's a short route, you know, box truck, you know, that's a simple example with the mobility space. Heavy industry, steel production requires a lot of heat, and so it's difficult to electrify. So again, just depends on the sector, depends on the use case. Yvette, please feel free to add.
Absolutely, and there's room for everyone. So there's spaces where electrifying that space is the right best rational thing to do, and then there's other spaces. For example, in Canada, cold areas, we've had a number of bus trials, both with battery electric and hydrogen does better in the very cold areas, but there's also a tremendous use case in the in other areas, right? So it's about finding the specific best use. We're lucky. There are multiple technologies, multiple things to choose from, right? So let's just choose the most optimal one for the application.
Yeah, that's great. That's helpful. Thank you. And that is all the time we have today. We're at the end of our hour. So thank you to both you, Yvette and Neil, for your time today. Thank you to our audience for joining us. Before we close, I would like to acknowledge the Herb Family Foundation, who supports the Council's Growing Business and Sustainability Network. This webinar series is part of that work. So thank you to them for their support. And then, of course, thank you to Midwest Alliance for Clean Hydrogen and the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association. Really appreciate all the knowledge you've shared with us today. So thank you.